What's going on, Workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And today we're talking about the Mediator, the Dancer, and the Gunbreaker. How do the two new jobs stack up? What does this mean for the future of tanking? And more. So, Chris, we've both got to go hands-on with it.
We did.
I'm just gonna have you drop the gauntlet right here. What's better, Gunbreaker or Dancer?
So just to put it in context, we got to play we got to be live on the game from 10:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. Briefly during lunch, they actually kind of made some changes to help everything run a little better because they had like a crazy LAN party with like 16 people going. So they basically like reset the server for us. But otherwise, we were on whatever amount of hours that is, but we didn't get to all the jobs. So Gunbreaker and Dancer, I think, were the only two jobs that you and I both played.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a reason we both played it, and I think that's because you started out on Dancer, right? And I started out in Gunbreaker. We're like, we'll just knock these both out. You started out as Vieira, I started out as Hrothgar. Great, done,
easy breezy.
I was like, Brian, you have to play this.
So
we were dividing everything in the middle. I was like, you have got to go hands on.
Yeah. So any footage that we decide to also throw up during this video is pre-release footage. Everything's subject to change. You know, they could change anything up till from now until the release of Shadowbringers. So what our impression of it is, first off, could easily change. But honestly, I love Dancer in a way that was just mind-blowing. So if I was going to say Gunbreaker versus Dancer, I would say Dancer, namely because, like, Dark Knight blew me away. And this is not a Dark Knight video. I don't want to get down that rabbit hole in this case. But holy crap, like, I really was impressed. I think the synergy, the utility was fascinating. And I am very much looking forward to actually, what I would say, fully understanding the job. Like, we didn't, like I actually played every job, but being the time, I only was able to touch certain jobs for a limited time, and then also I spent more time on the things that I was really interested in. Dancer, Summoner, Dark Knight, Monk actually surprised the crap out of me. Again, all that you could check in on our massive amount of videos that are all live now. I have to say Dancer, because, and it's not to say Gunbreaker's bad by any stretch of the imagination, I thought it was fascinating. I really actually enjoyed it. It leads into a greater conversation about the tank changes that I want to have on this video. But that's just where I fall. Chris, you asked me the question, same question to you.
So heads up, I think that Gunbreaker was more fun to me than Dancer, but that's because I've never been a physical ranged player. And so heads up, like, the role already had a huge advantage to Gunbreaker, and Gunbreaker feels super awesome. Like, you're right in the midst of things and you're just blowing things up.
How does it feel compared to your Warrior, though? Because you've been maining Warrior, you've been, and then you and I are both caster bros. Like, at the end of the day, we both love our casters, so that's a really good point you make about the range DPS physical side of it. How does it stack up to your Warrior, though?
So I ran the dungeon 4 times. They let us play the first dungeon, well, one of the dungeons, I think the 73. So we ran that one. I ran that one 4 times. I ran it on my Warrior, my Gunbreaker, Dancer, and White Mage, just to get a feel of all the perspectives. And the reason I ran it on Tank twice was because I wanted to try it on Gunbreaker. First of all, I was really impressed with how it felt blind. My first time through the dungeon, I ran Gunbreaker. And literally all I did was I pulled up my actions menu and I pulled mobs out in the world. I was level 80. The mobs next to the starting area were like level 72 or something. So I'm literally hitting on these things. They're dying really easy, just enough to get a feel for like the first few abilities on my bar. And then I just rushed into the dungeon with a trust, which is a whole nother video, with a trust, and just said, I'll figure it out. And so, like, I'm literally mid-pull, dragging abilities down onto my bar, right-clicking them as I'm changing different keybinds and stuff like that. It's not my keybind, so I'm in the keybind menu, mid-pull, in a dungeon I've never seen, and Gunbreaker felt so natural. It flowed easily. It felt like it had a lot more buttons than some of the other jobs, but not to the point that I was worried about bloat. I don't know how you feel.
No, it's a freaking fact. I felt like Gunbreaker had the most abilities, at least from what I can remember being a few days out. I'm working on the actual guide talking about those skills, but I was really, it's impressive, but they had a ton. When I went to play Dark Knight, I felt like, oh, this is great. Like, it's very, very condensed, very tight as far as the job. And like it felt good. Like I'm not sitting here and saying that they shouldn't have had the abilities they had. I think essentially when you look at the 4 tanks now, like they gives them a lot of room to play around with from a playstyle perspective. You want a lot of abilities, Gunbreaker. You want something that's like, you know, it ends up being kind of that an interesting 4th pillar that will play on the long run. But you had another thought.
No, so when comparing it to Warrior, Warrior to me felt the same. It's not that it wasn't. It's not that they didn't make changes and stuff. But and I don't mean that as a bad thing.
Right.
I think Warrior felt great all through Stormblood, and so like I would hope they wouldn't just be like, well, this was perfect, throw it out. Like so, it just felt like a continued iteration of that thought. It didn't feel like a big, huge number of balance changes needed to take place. So its identity is still intact. And Warrior still felt like that simple, I'm just going to bash your face in, as opposed to Gunbreaker was a lot more buttons. And so, like, I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure I wasn't playing optimally. Like, playing a blind.
I don't think I played any of these
I
jobs
was reading
optimally.
tooltips in the middle of pulling the boss. I'm like, oh, that's what that does. Because what happens is you click an ability and then others highlight. And you're like, all right, that's a combo. Pretty intuitive. But what happens is you get further into that chain, you notice multiple things highlight. You're like, well, which one do I go with? And so naturally you start to read it and you assume things like, well, one of these might be AoE, one might be single target, one might be a dot versus one might be a defensive thing. And so you start to read through these abilities and get a feel for like which situation you would go down, like which fork in the road. But it's a lot more forks than Warrior.
Yeah.
So I think Warrior will still probably be my like, hey, will you come tank this for me? Like lazy, like I'm just gonna come have fun. Like let's just go kill things. But Gunbreaker is a solid contender for being my main in Shadowbringers.
That's gonna be interesting to see how that ends up playing out. That's one of the fun things about every expansion is it has the ability to change things up. Because even if, let's say, your job, your main, the thing that you love is ruined, like there might be something out there that actually is better that you end up enjoying more. Now we don't absolutely know. Now I want to take the conversation a little bit because you fall down on that Gunbreaker is is the best. I think Dancer is incredible. That's actually great that we disagree. If anybody didn't know, we actually haven't had this conversation yet. We specifically say,
intentionally.
We specifically at times go and say, okay, let's talk about it when we hit record so we can get our raw reaction to each other's thoughts. And I want to shift it into the concept of tanking because one of the things they changed I don't like, but also I understand it. Like there's a weird dichotomy when it comes down to it. So for those who don't know, who might have missed the live letter, or maybe you just need a refresher, that there is no disadvantage to being in tank stance. In fact, actually, the only thing it does is that when you think of an 8-man piece of content, in my mind, this is just how I've interpreted it. We didn't run any 8-man content. In my mind, it's literally saying after the main tank has the hate, might as well put on tank stance because you're only going to reduce damage mitigation to you. You're not going to hurt your damage output. You're only going to reduce the healer's need to keep you alive because you're not going to catch up unless you provoke or something like that, because there is no quote-unquote hate building rotation. Is literally like everything you do in tank stance builds hate. When you're not in tank stance, you don't build hate. Damage, there's no damage down as like where it was in Stormblood. Chris, like, what are your raw thoughts on that?
So, just to get out in front of this comment, I would say that, at least off the top of my head, say there's 100 things that changed in Shadowbringers. All of them are for the improvement of this game, with the exception of, off the top of my head, one, and that is this change. So we're getting to this before we talk about a lot of other stuff. I don't know how many other videos we'll record today. I do not like this change. I feel that the goal of this change is to get more people to be willing to play tank by drawing from that melee DPS pool. But I think
faster Q times, no loss.
But at the loss of actual tanking, the ability to manage enmity is something that affects the entire party. It means that if you're a DPS that has a lot of single target, you may have to switch targets because otherwise you're going to rip aggro off the tank. And that's not like, oh, the tank's not doing a good job, look at how badass I am, like I'm so good at like ripping off all this. No, you need to be helping out. You need to be aware that when you toss hots up at the beginning of a fight, if there's a lot of ads, that tank is bound by global cooldowns, and so I can only hit so many things, and so it's your job to adjust. And I don't know if did you try tanking with it off at all?
Yeah.
I actually was able to make it to the top of the threat, sometimes on my own with the toggle off.
Yeah. Now, is that with trust though?
Yes.
I would venture. Like my betting.
I bet
like,
with players I can't.
Right.
I bet with players I am struggling.
That's exactly how I feel.
I can probably keep my primary focus. I can probably keep my main up because I'm topping the DPS chart basically.
Yeah. We both tested that, but it was with trust and not because I played Summoner when we actually ran real human being.
Yeah, I ran.
And I think essentially, what you bring up, the point that you're like making is that like ultimately, if you're in a 4-man group and you're not in tank stance, like right now, then you would essentially be hurting the party because people have to heal you for more. And there's no disadvantage in it. In fact, you're actually working harder when you really shouldn't. So the question then to you is this the casualization of tanking?
Oh, it absolutely is. 100%. 100%.
Could there been
they literally said we have 2 DPS, a healer, and a tank in 4-mans, and then that balance adjusts as we move into larger content. But healers do not need to be adding to the DPS pool. They need to be healing. So we're moving healers more towards a pure healing, which was stated a little wrong in the live translation. We got a little bit different. That's a different thing, but let's get to that. But meanwhile, we're going to take tanks and we're going to drag them more into the casual. So I really was excited when they said the healers are going to be pure healing, but then the tank thing just feels like they just said, hey, if you're interested in being a DPS that has a faster queue time, you may be used to run healer and focus DPS.
Right.
Now
they've
you're running
it.
tank and focusing DPS.
They shifted it, yeah. Right.
You don't have any interest in actually tanking or healing. You just want those faster queue times.
So essentially, if we were making a guide right now, like within the Shadowbringers and the context of it, is that if you wanted to tank, if you wanted to, like, ultimately, I think this is going to make a higher need for healers. But if you wanted the tank, face the target, face the enemy away from your party, run before everybody else, be in tank stance. Like that is the rule. I mean, we'll have to see what if the content has any impact on this, if they make any adjustments to this whatsoever. If within tank stance that means you need to use like provoke just to be able to like manage this, that value. But ultimately, I think it essentially says that healers aren't meant to DPS. Tanks are actually now a DPS. Where before, though, you could even make the argument that we had 4 DPS, and 2 of them had, kind of the fast pass to get into the content, and 2 of them had the slow pass. Now, it seems like you have 3 DPS, and maybe what we'll see is a real big reliance on healer, which ultimately then speaks to the question of, should Dancer have been a healer, or should they have introduced a healer, a 4th healer, in regards to it? That's another topic, another video that we're going to cover here, and then you guys can go check it out. Links somewhere probably in the description or somewhere in the recommended on this channel.
It's a lot, guys. We're publishing a lot today. I know that we're not going to get everything published in time for the embargo, so just keep an eye on the channel this week because we are going to be publishing way more often than YouTube notifications or any of that stuff will push out, as well as check on all the other creators. So I know I'm dropping this right in the middle of the video, but Yoshi P took 37 interviews. We were the 37th and final interview, which means that every set of questions that was asked in an interview, all those other creators, whether it be Gamer Escape or Mr. Happy or Larry Czar or whoever, we didn't all have access to each other's questions and answers. And so I know we kind of talked about them afterwards, but that's not the same as going out and finding all the content that went live today.
Yeah. So, Dancer and Gunbreaker, we both fall on different fences. For me, I think one of the reasons why is like Dark Knight just felt great. Paladin felt amazing. Warrior felt great, but it's like at the same time, like I've been maining Warrior. Maybe it's a good time for me to kind of shift into either into a Gunbreaker, shift into a Paladin, or shift into a Dark Knight. And then, healing is interesting, and we're going to cover that in pretty much another video again for today. Chris, do you have any final thoughts regarding the Gunser debate, the Dancer Gunbreaker?
So, Dancer Gunbreaker. The last thing is, should Dancer have been a healer? That's kind of the last thing surrounding that debate in my mind. Otherwise, like they're not really appealing to the same audience. It does feel a little bit like a red mage where it has some utility to it. Like you have like a what's called a dance partner where you can like, so you have like a heal ability and stuff like that. And then because of my dance partner, in our dungeon run where we ran as a group of 4 with a couple of other people there, I was the dancer, and we were all playing our first run on classes. None of us had prepped. People were putting skills on bars. So like literally like a bunch of experience as far as years of playing, sitting in this group of 4. We were all sitting next to each other, being able to hear each other's voices, which is a huge advantage, but nobody knew what they were doing. And a few of us hadn't even seen the dungeon yet. And so I selected our tank as the dance partner because the tank was about to go down. And then I was able to toss out, I can increase the tank's crit, I can increase healing to the tank, I can do all of these things.
You end up having a 400 potency AoE cure if you have a dance partner. So curing waltz is 200 just on the stats, but with dance partner it's 200 from you AoE and then 200 from them AoE. So you can end up getting a 400 cure AoE, which is actually pretty potent when you think about it, and that's a game changer. Tank was about to die. You saved the raid, or you saved the run.
Just enough. We cleared the boss first try on a super sloppy pull because we had just that one little extra bit. So it's not that like in an optimal running group that it would even be needed. The content is balanced to not have it, but it definitely helped make up for the fact that we were playing with actions not on bars. So it helped overcome the kind of like that, the casual mistakes that take place in roulettes. Mm-hmm. So that's really it for me. Did you have anything else you wanted to, on the Dancer Gunbreaker? All our topics are going to be blending together here, but on Dancer Gunbreaker, did you have any other thoughts?
I think both are just an incredibly solid addition to the game. We're going to have to see how it works with the meta. We're going to have to see how it works in 8-man, how it works in the raid. We got a small slice of this, and we were very happy to have that. It's really cool to see, and we'll have to see what adjustments are made. But ultimately, just like where we saw, I think Red Mage and Samurai came in really strong. Dancer and Gunbreaker are coming in really strong this expansion, and that's exciting because I think Dancer has been something that people have longed for. Gunbreaker is going to be an interesting thing because when we talk about tanking, and when we talk about are they simplifying tanking, it comes down to maybe how the different tanks play. Where you could have maybe Gunbreaker is the most technical and skill tank. So if you're looking for that challenge, if you're looking for that optimization, etc., you could probably squeeze out the most damage on a Gunbreaker, but it's going to require a little bit more skill. And then as you look at the 4 tanks, that kind of feeds into it. And there's not really a disadvantage in being in tank stance because they've obviously gotten rid of the DPS stance. I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but we're going to have to, that's more, we'll be able to answer that maybe come 5-1 or 5-2. Having spent more time with the tanks, more time in the raids, how does it overall feel in the content? Because if they've simplified things enough, and this is going to be covered in our other video, look forward to it. Shadow Casuals is the title that we agreed on. It's does this mean they can actually make the mechanics more engaging and challenging, etc.? So look forward to that video. Those are my final thoughts. Those are Chris's final thoughts. For WorkToGame, my name is Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We'll see you in our 1,000 other videos today.
Take care.
Hey guys, it's me, Brian. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you're new here, we hope you hit that subscribe button. Check us out. We talk a lot about video games, and we hope to at least hear from you in the comments below. We also try to respond to our comments. We really appreciate the comments, the discussion, all the various points of view that everybody is so kindly, I guess, and politely or impolitely shares with us from time to time. So anyway, guys, again, thanks for watching this video. We hope you hit that like button. We hope you hit that subscribe button. Come back for more content each and every day. We post a lot around here, and we'd love to hear from you about what you like about video games and everything, and especially if you have any questions that you're stuck on in anything. So anyway, signing off. See you next time.